Hello and welcome to Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I'm the host of the program, and I always want to thank you for tuning in because certainly you could be elsewhere. But as always, I have important people who influence our lives, not only here locally, but around this nation. We start with local government, we go to state government, we go to national government. But here in Stoughton, I have the pleasure of having the CEO of Stoughton, the town manager, Grimm, as my guest today. Before I introduce her, let me tell you a little bit about her. Robin has 30-year career. She's devoted to higher education and public service. She earned her PhD in rhetoric and composition at the University of Rhode Island and was a teacher early in her career. In 2003, she decided to run for a local city council seat in her hometown of Cranston, Rhode Island, and decided, she lost that by 2 votes. So folks, it shows you that 2 votes, 1 vote, all counts in politics. She lost by 2 votes, but then she decided to join the then incoming mayor as a deputy director of administration, and the rest is history. She is now here as our town manager. Has been here. I last interviewed her upon her being here for now a year plus, and I want you to get a sense of what she has been doing, what she has in mind, what's going to happen here in Stoughton for the next fiscal year. So again, let me introduce to you and welcome Robin Grimm, our town manager.
Thank you very much.
Town manager, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it was great having you. I looked back at my notes and I said, wow, a year had passed. I know this is your 3rd town meeting that you're coming upon soon. We're going to talk about what's going to be on the agenda for that town meeting. We're going to talk about some of the things that are pressing and of concern to you. But let's go back retrospectively and let's talk about what has transpired over this year. You can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you wish. But let's see, since last February when I spoke to you, in fact, February 7th, tell our viewing audience what's been happening.
So time flies when you're having fun, and
Yes.
I am having a wonderful time in Stoughton. You hit on something when in your introduction, you talked about how you deal with municipal, state, and federal government, and I think I perhaps am most honored to serve in the role that I do at the municipal level. And I've said this before, municipal government is where things happen every day in people's lives. At those higher levels, there are important things that go on, but I have the privilege and the honor of working with people every day and seeing the people that I work with. And the past year and a half or so, I have had the chance to be face-to-face with so many people in Stoughton. And it's been an absolute pleasure to do that. It's a great town, the people are engaged. The more I'm here, the more I feel, and I've said this before, it's so much like you mentioned that my hometown was Cranston, and I had worked there and eventually served as a director of administration there. And Cranston and Stoughton are so similar. The passion of the community is what drives it. So for me, that's been the best part, is getting to know the people of Stoughton. And I'm so appreciative because I have a sense that people have gotten to know me, and I hope that they've gotten to trust me. I came in as an outsider, and that's not easy, and I know, coming from the type of community that I come from, people really have to be receptive to that, and I've been very, very lucky that the people of Stoughton have been receptive to that, as far as I can tell. So that's allowed me to be able to go out there and talk about the things that are important to me, listen to the people's concerns, and again, I think that's been the best part of it, is getting to know the people of Stoughton. Over the past year, we've worked aggressively on dealing with the operating budget. And one of the things that I think is so important, and I kind of gave a little mini State of Stoughton statement or address, State of Stoughton address. We'll call it the State of the Town address. And I did that at the beginning of the FinCom meeting the other night, because I think sometimes in Stoughton we get pretty down on ourselves, and there's always sort of the mentality of, oh, it's Stoughton, it's Stoughton, it's Stoughton. It's a great town. And one of the things I said when I interviewed, and I think has held true, is that when I started researching the town when I came in, one of the things about Stoughton that people don't realize is it has a solid debt stabilization fund. We have a solid rainy day fund. We have solid building stabilization funds. We have a strong bond rating, which is why we're able to borrow for projects. Those things that make a town strong behind the scenes are in place. The biggest challenge that Stoughton faced when I came was that we were sort of on a cliff with the budget from one-time budgeting practices, and sometimes out of necessity. And we've worked, when I came in, when I first came in, Mr. Tisdale had just done an admirable job as an interim town manager, and was trying to close a gap on a budget where we had a $5 million gap from what departments were requesting to what we had coming in for revenue. We were able to close that last year to 1.2 million, reducing the number of one-time fills, which are effectively structural deficits, and we're getting closer. This year, we now pretty much the only sort of one-time fill, if you will, is free cash, which to some degree is expected to be used, and FinCom has asked us to reduce the amount that we use, rightfully so. And we were able to come in with what the schools wanted and what we were able to slide over toward the schools with a gap of about $470,000, which will close presumably significantly with state aid changes.
Let me help. It's like those of us in government who use the acronyms, and the viewing audience doesn't know. So let's break it down for them.
Sure.
You talked about free cash. You talked about one time.
Sure.
So just to give that person who is actually the ones whose taxes are paying that
Absolutely.
to understand exactly what you're saying.
So free cash is what results at the end of the year, for any number of reasons. There should be a little money left over. Ideally, you don't want a huge amount of money left over because this is people's tax dollars and you don't want to overtax. But a little bit of money is left over, typically from positions that might not get filled over a period of time. For example, if we have 2 or 3 vacancies in the police department and we can't get seats at the academy, those are budgeted positions that have been funded. So at the end of the year, when that budget is reconciled, there's a little bit of extra money. That money is what we call free cash, and there's always debate on how that should be used. And I'm a firm believer it should not be too much money, because then we shouldn't be taking in as much as we are. We are not a for-profit business. We're a service organization using taxpayer dollars. So at the end of the year, when we have that money, it's presumed that some of that can be used the next year to help fund the budget. One of the concerns about overusing free cash is if in a given year you don't turn back a lot and you've been relying on that for the next year, you're going to be short. So when we talk about structural deficits, that's when you use a one-time plug. So if I know every year I'm going to have to spend $100,000 on something, and I sell a building for $100,000 that one time, and I spend that 100, and I offset that 100,000, what's going to happen the next years going out? That's a structural deficit. That's when you create structural deficits, when you use one-time money to plug ongoing expenses. So we always try to avoid that. And free cash technically is one-time money, except we do know that reasonably there should be some turn back every year. FinCom has asked us to reduce that every year, and we have successfully done so, and they would like us to reduce it even more next year. And we will
Well,
move
don't you
toward
also
that.
have my recollection when I sat in that chair is that you have, you also have, lack of a better term, the rainy day fund.
Yes.
That you do have monies that you set aside.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that a bit?
So the rainy day fund is what's called an unrestricted fund balance. And what that means is literally if you have save it for a rainy day, the expression that our parents or our grandparents talked about, well, they were right. Prudent budgeting is not a bad thing. And that's in your household, your emergency savings account effectively. So if we had some horrible disaster, the town could float expenses that are unanticipated. However, when you go to borrow money, your bond rating agencies, which helps determine the interest rate that you borrow at, look at whether or not you have a significant amount in your rainy day fund. And people go back and forth on what the numbers should be. It should be about 7 or 8% of your budget. And we're in that range, and that's a really good thing. And that's critical for when we borrow money, that we have those funds established for when the bond rating agencies look at us.
Let's talk about that as well. And I keep hearkening back to my own term because, hey, I had a great time serving in that capacity and met a lot of great and smart people that helped to manage Stoughton's town government during that time frame, selectmen, folks in the financial area, et cetera. And I can recall the conversations around trying to get to a good bond rating, which during that time frame we did increase. Talk to our viewing audience about the importance of the bond rating, what that means. I know you know it, and I just want to add, I know I mentioned about Cranston. You know, you were so loved in Cranston that you served in a bunch of positions in Cranston as the Director of Administration. You worked as the Assistant to the Mayor, Director of Operations for the Providence Public Schools. So I mean, you've managed, you've done it all in various capacities. And then I will talk about some of the things you enjoy personally. But for now, I wanted to give folks that backdrop. You're not coming here as a newie. You're not coming here unskilled. And that's probably the reason why the selectmen hired you for this position. You're coming here with a knowledge base of how it's being done. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that you were in an 80,000 person town. This is about a 28,000 person town. But, so you have some other ideas about how our budgeting would be, and I know about some of them, so I'm just going to push the envelope. But for the moment, let's talk about what it means to have a good bond rating, and two, what is Stoughton's bond rating at the present time?
I will have to defer to Bill Rowe on the exact, but we're in a position where we're in the AA levels, I believe, and I think we have 2 rating agencies that are looking in. So we have a stable outlook, which is the most important thing. So we are in, I believe, a AA1 with a stable outlook, but I'll confirm that. But the importance of that bond rating, when I first got into government, and I was deputy director in Cranston, at the time Cranston's bond rating had plummeted, and it was 1 notch above junk bond, which basically meant that if the city had to borrow money for infrastructure, just basic road repairs, things like that, they were going to borrow at extremely high interest rates because they're not a good risk for investors. And it plummeted because the rainy day fund, if you will, had been raided, for lack of a better word. There had been financial problems. The city hadn't raised taxes when it really needed to. Contracts were going up, labor contracts were going up, but taxes were not raised for 3 or 4 years straight, which really is unsustainable. Costs do go up. The cost of asphalt, salt, all those things go up. And if you don't adjust for those, and we never want to raise taxes, but at that point, it was 4 years of no increase, and it plummeted the town almost to the brink of bankruptcy. The town had an unfunded pension, local pension. But the bond rating plummeted primarily because the rainy day fund, they literally were pulling money out of it and using it toward payroll and flipping it into one-day borrowing notes instead of long-term. Remember, that money is invested.
Yes.
It brings money in. It makes money. So the importance of it is, and I think I became keenly aware of the importance of that bond rating when you work in a community that has a horrible bond rating. And so literally, we sat on the phone with rating agencies as we tried to turn the city around at that point. And I've sat in on rating agency calls throughout my career. And what's so important to them is the stabilization funds, is that your operating budget is running without one-time fixes. I mean, if I was on the phone right now with a rating agency, these were the things I would point out. That we talk about our team of leadership, government structure, all of those changes that we put in place to make the town more solid or keep what is solid in place. That we have a building stabilization fund if we have a roof blow off. Those are the things that the rating agencies look at. And it's so important because right now, for example, we're looking at a Park Street sewer project. We need to be able to borrow at really good interest rates to save the taxpayer money. Ultimately, it all comes back to, depending on how that gets put in, whether it's through betterments or a combination of betterments and borrowing, and it may very well be something to that effect. Whenever we're borrowing, that bond rating is critical for the interest. So to get your bond rating up or to maintain a stable rating, which is where we're at with a stable outlook, means that the rating agencies, the Wall Street people in New York, are saying, okay, your community's in good shape, it's okay. And that's a great thing.
I can recall some of what you're saying. John Stagnoni was the chairman of the selectmen at the time, and we had exactly that conversation with the bond rating agencies, and they're very, very clear as to what criteria they're going to use to be able to set what your rating will be. And it does have an impact on your being able to borrow. But you mentioned betterment, the water betterment down 27. Near and dear to my heart. Some opposition, finally got through on a town meeting vote. I know that there is some public hearings and comment period that's coming up. Let's talk about that project and what you think and feel as a town manager, as I know the town engineer does as well, what you feel, what that project can do for the residents of Stoughton.
It's huge. The project's huge. So Mr. Tisdale, this has sort of been his baby for a couple of years, and I have to thank him for stellar work on this. Last week he presented a couple of different options to the board for funding. We did, as you pointed out, get, I believe, $800,000 from town meeting last year to do a design, study and design. And it came in significantly less. We were able to get it, I believe, at around $600,000 and change. So we always are happy when it costs us a little bit less. And it's now a two-phase project. Phase one, though, does encompass some of the primary areas that we want. The bottom line of all of this is it's a revenue generator. It's an investment. This is truly an investment. This isn't fixing infrastructure just to maintain. This is an investment to grow. And so Mark Tisdale had coordinated, for instance, stakeholder meetings where he invited business owners along that corridor to come and listen and hear about the project. I walked out of that meeting and was just sort of listening in the background, and the buzz was extraordinarily positive. What's happening is these businesses are very limited on how much they can develop on their property because they're running off septic systems. And so we have industrial area that's used primarily for storage, for example, as opposed to manufacturing. We would love to be able to do some bio work. If we can get biotech in, that would be tremendous, but you can't do it with a septic system. We have restaurants that struggle with septic along there. So we want that to grow. That's critical to grow. That's where we can get real revenue, A, off property values, because the values of those industrial properties and commercial properties will be far greater if they're sewered, and B, with what will come in. Mark has already gotten letters in that he'll share with town meeting from businesses encouraging this and supporting it. Businesses poised to come into town once they know it's going to happen, actually waiting for this to happen. This is tremendous, because one of the things, to go back to the budget and why I feel that it's so important for people to know it's not a doom and gloom scenario. My concern sometimes with Stoughton's in tough shape is that we're sending a message to developers not to come here when we talk about that. And that's why I'm so passionate about the fact that Stoughton's in great shape. We're moving forward. We're solid on the rating agencies. We're solid on the numbers. And yes, our operating budget's tight, but frankly, we should be fiscally prudent on an operating budget. But Park Street Sewer, I've said right along, if we get $1 or $2 million more, which is a relatively small amount, just that alone in revenue gives us a little breathing room.
Well, let me just, in terms of, again...
And that would be nothing, by the way, in the scheme of what this could generate.
Well, I'm passionate about the project, have been, still am, and see it as a great future for Stoughton. And there's two direct impacts that I see right off the bat. One is it has a direct impact on the residential property rate. You increase the commercial and industrial rate, that could potentially lessen the taxes on the real estate of residential.
Absolutely.
That could be one. I'm not saying that it will be one, and I don't want one to say, back in 2020, Feaster, you said it would be, or the town manager said it would have an impact. It could have an impact. Secondly, Campanelli Drive is underdeveloped solely because of this issue.
Yes.
And I constantly, would argue Stoughton could be a destination just simply where we're located, but we're not attractive to businesses. That's why things are happening in Canton and Westwood and other places, because they have that infrastructure that's in place. So even that in and of itself could have a dramatic impact. That if we could, and those residents along that area, they're going to benefit from all of this. And I think the cost to them to convert over from some of which is environmentally inappropriate that they have, to a sewer system can have benefit for them as well.
Absolutely, and frankly, for many of those homes and businesses, if their septics fail, the cost of repairing or replacing those septics is more than what the betterment would be, if the town goes with the betterment.
Right.
or as opposed to a full borrowing. And that's a policy that the Board of Selectmen obviously is going to have to determine. But you hit it on the head. This is a chance for us to shift the revenue stream off of the residential to the commercial and business, which is far less regressive than, because they're based on a profit margin. A household's a household. And while property values will go up, it will not go up to a degree that people's taxes in those residential are going to become unaffordable. I mean, one of the concerns we heard was, well, yeah, if my property value goes up, now my taxes are going to go up. Can I afford to stay in my home on those streets? And when Mark did the studies of where the property values, there's a dramatic increase in value for industrial commercial for having a sewer. There's some increase in value for a home, but where their increase in value is going to come is that generally Stoughton becomes a better community overall.
Well, there was, again, I know the upcoming meetings will be more explanatory on how those types of issues are going to be addressed. But I know some of the conversations, and in case there are some viewers who are going to feel directly impacted by all of this, let's parse this out a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we have we do this, and as you said, you may borrow all of it. You may have in terms of betterment, which means that there will be an assessment in terms of on the sewer. And fine, to a lot of folks, if your property value can increase, you get the long-term impact of that. But there's also discussion said, okay, we would tie the betterment stuff on the back end. Mm-hmm. There are all different types of variations that have been discussed that's on there. So, I think that you, along with the selectmen, are going to be working it out at what may be best for the citizenry. Mm-hmm. So those are all possibilities. Am I correct, Robin?
Yes, and I encourage people to go back and watch the town meeting from last Tuesday, 2 nights ago. And Mr. Tisdale presented 3 or 4 different options on how that could work, might work, and what the board will be reviewing. He presented that to the board for them to chew on, to then determine what the policy would be that would be implemented. By the time it goes to town meeting for vote, there will be a proposed policy on how we plan to fund this.
Great. Because oftentimes we've been criticized here in doing studies and they just get cobwebs on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And one that may fall into that category, but the need definitely is apparent. We talked about this offline, is a public safety complex.
Yes.
Which I know our friends in Sharon, our neighbors, they did. They have a complex which is down Main Street. Drive by it all the time as I'm heading over to 95. Where is the conversation now on our public safety complex, public safety, or maybe our police? I don't know what's being discussed. There was some discussion about trying to put it on land that was owned by the school department. So where do things stand? So
we absolutely are still passionate about the need. And I think that this is important to talk about. There's not much debate about the need for a replacement for Station 1, Fire Station 1. The conditions that our firefighters are in really are just not on par to where they need to be. Modern fire stations have what they call hot zones, for example. So if firefighters come in from chemical fires or hazmat areas, they have a decontamination zone, for example, before they go into living quarters. Things like that we're not even remotely with a 100-year-old station doing. But what's a little more of a challenge, I think, for people to understand is the need for the new police station, or a new renovated or a public safety facility. But the fact that where our police station is right now and the size and how it's functioning is really not, it's just not optimal. It's not even close to optimal. Chief McNamara does the best she can with what she has, but we have people who are literally in closets that have been converted, lieutenants who are sitting in closets. We don't have comfortable areas for people to come in and interview. If the public has an interview, we have a victim come in. We do our best to have a comfortable place for them to be, but we don't have the facilities that we need. We're trying to expand to deal with the opioid crisis. We need officers dedicated to that. We don't have the space for those officers. We are, without divulging too much that's security-based or has to remain somewhat confidential, there are concerns about how much evidence storage we have left. And evidence is not something we can just put in a pod. The chain of evidence is critical in often prosecuting criminals. And if people follow, they will see what's going on in this town. I mean, we pulled in the first part of the year, I believe 17 guns off the street. I mean, a very short amount of time, we're pulling firearms off the street. In the span of last year, it was a large number of firearms. And the chief has all of those numbers. But those have to be stored. Those have to be monitored. I mean, there's all sorts of things we have to deal with. On top of it, the building has HVAC issues, water issues that could be fixed, but are going to involve a huge amount of money. So preliminarily, we had a study approved by town meeting, a feasibility study. But this is not a study to determine if we need. This is a study to determine what we need and where. And so the debate has been, and we've gone back and forth on whether it should be one facility, two separate facilities, a complex, what it might be. Can we renovate the police station was a question I asked. I have no problem with it being two separate facilities if that's what's most beneficial. What did come out preliminarily, however, is to renovate the police station and build a new fire station is more costly than to build one building. One building, there's a commonality of systems, a sharing of your HVAC, for instance, your heating systems, your fuel, whatever you're using, common areas, common waiting areas for the public. So the single facility becomes more likely financially the better option, and operationally it works. So it's not easy to find a site, though, for response times. And the site we call the Fano Drive site, loosely, behind South School, is on land. It's land that's technically owned by the town. It's historically been presumed, because of the way it was acquired years ago, to be land that was going to be used for school use, for New South School, presumably. The reality is there's about 38 acres of land there.
Okay.
And there's absolutely no reason why both a New South School and a public safety facility cannot coexist there. The reason it's so optimal, it is by far, for response time for fire, the best location.
Right.
Without question. And the chief has made that abundantly clear. The number 2 choice on the list of narrowing is significantly more response time than what this would offer. So while I know people are concerned about South School, those very same neighbors are going to be best served with a public safety facility in that area for fire response. I think, I look at it this way. We're certainly supportive of the fact that South School at some point is going to need to be rebuilt. There's no question that South School will need replacement. A couple of things to consider. There's land adjacent to South School that the public safety facility would not be anywhere near. That adjacent land, if they build adjacent, Mass School Buildings facility will actually cover the cost of the demolition of the old school. Whereas if they actually build it on the land we're looking at on the other side, that may not happen. They won't get the money for the demolition, for example. There's going to be some infrastructure development that will happen with the public safety complex that will benefit a New South School. So I think it's actually mutually beneficial to both. It's just there's been this dynamic of, well, what about if the schools want that land? I really believe that with 38 acres of land, we should be able to figure out how to have both coexist very happily and comfortably. And I believe it's in the best interest of the community.
Well, I always say I'm not going to push an issue, but I think that this is one that needs discussing. But before I get to that, and it does involve town-school relationship, but I remember that discussion, and I'm 8 years removed from the interim town manager, and that was the same discussion. That was when I believe that site, or right before that, maybe it could have been during Frank Crimmon's term, when that discussion around that site was were first originated because of what you said, response time, particularly for the fire department.
Absolutely.
And again, if any of the folks can remember, my view with regard to the firefighters in Station 1, I almost want to be their lawyer, more or less than anything else, as a result of the conditions. And we did some things trying to at least shore some things up. We spent some money over the years trying to do basically Band-Aid fixes to that building. So I'm hopeful that this conversation can progress. I mean, it's a matter of, we have to coalesce around this, and I know that there's also the question of where will the monies derive from.
Yes.
And we did an override for the schools. We did which included also the library. But this is critical and important, and I my sense is, I know what taxes I pay over where I live, And I pay a sizable amount of the taxes
Yes.
in this town. But the reality is, I think that it's important for us to be able to do that. And I just hope that we can move this agenda forward. I'm talking about 8 years since I was here, and I think the conversation began even before that. But I also know before I came in, there was always this school versus town issue. Have we been able to bridge that? We had some success during the time when I was there. I don't know how it was during your predecessor's time. Where are we now? Because the only way that this is going to get done is, yes, school department, and we know there's some idea of who owns what. Let's get this done. Let's cooperate. Is there a possibility of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to address two things that you brought up. First of all, the Band-Aids on Station 1. Absolutely, and we continue to spend money Band-Aiding it. But I think what's important to note that the public needs to know is that we are also Band-Aiding the police station. And as much as that building looks new and pretty from the outside, we spend huge amounts of money on HVAC and water issues in that station. So I think it's important to note that we're going to be, in another 8 years, saying the same thing about the police station, that, oh, we've been Band-Aiding it for 8 years. And that's a lot of money, frankly, wasted. And that's that's hard to even think about when we talk about that much money
Well, if we
wasted.
change development, that'll be a great site right by the train station in terms of a major housing development. That would be ideal. The town would
Absolutely.
reap big dollars for that being right by the train
And
station.
in fact, we're in the process of doing an RFI
Yeah.
for those buildings. If
Yeah.
we were to move, if we vacate that police station,
Yeah.
putting out an RFI on who might be interested in those properties is part of this whole thing, to say to the
Right.
public, okay, this is what we're going to do with the old buildings too, because the public's asking that question, rightfully so. The fire station's kind of prime. It's a cool little economic development spot. But the police station, there's nothing wrong with the location in and of itself. The building just is not equipped to serve a police department. The systems aren't designed significantly, substantially enough, substantively enough, the whole thing. But back to your question about the schools, I think one of the things that's important is there's been a lot of dialogue between the Board of Selectmen and the school committee on this. The the respective chairpersons of both boards are speaking and interacting. The design team for the project went to a school committee meeting and presented to them. The fire chief has spoken to them. They have come to public safety facility committee meetings, the school committee, representatives of the school committee. But overall, I want to take a second to talk about relationships with the school in general, even on the budgeting process and whatnot. I have to say, it's just been an absolute pleasure to work with Dr. Marcus. He is so committed to the town as a whole. I think that people see that. He comes to public events, he's involved, he invites me to events. He's just a great person to work with. Dr. Marcus understands when I say, okay, you have the kids during the day and do a tremendous job with them and need to do a tremendous job with those kids. But I have their parents all day too, and their families and their grandparents to think about. And he gets that. And I don't want to speak for him, but he truly understands whole child is what we're talking about with education. It's what happens in the community. It's what we can offer for recreational programs when the kids leave schools, for example. This is why both, I hate to say both sides, but effectively both sides of the house need to flourish for the town to be solid.
Well, I have to underscore, I've enjoyed an excellent relationship with Dr. Marcus. I believe that his prior tenure, if I recall correctly, was in Sharon. And he is a genuine gentleman.
Absolutely.
Around how he is looking at the school. I've talked to him about a number of issues of concern to me, such as diversity on his staff and things of that nature. He's involved with the Stoughton organization that's dealing with diversity and inclusion organization. So yeah, he has,
Stellar.
he has just opened up a lot of things. So it's been a pleasure for me personally to be able to interact with him as well.
And part of the reason we were able to put forward a decent budget, frankly, this year was that he came in with as trim of a budget as he could come in with as well, and made every effort to do right by everybody as a whole, the children, the town, all of us.
And the interesting part, and the reason why I asked the question about the town school piece is simply because statutorily, the school comes in with its budget And you either vote it up, vote it down. There's no tinkering with it. Something that I had to learn when I, sat in the chair where you are, and which befuddled me. But nonetheless, I want folks to understand that's how it is. It's a matter of they present the town meeting, and you either vote it up or down. It's almost like no line item veto on anything on the school department, which is not the case with the town side.
We're accountable for literally every line item, and every line item of ours can be tinkered with, if you will,
Yes.
but not the schools, and it is statutorial. But I think part of what has worked so well this year is I don't like the concept of, okay, we get 65%, you get 35%. The schools automatically, you're going to get 65% of everything that comes in. Because then we're spending, it's almost like saying, okay, this is how much I have to spend and I'm going to spend it all. I don't like that concept anyway for dealing with taxpayer money. I like to say, okay, what exactly do you absolutely need? This is what I say to my staff. This is when we talk about zero-based budgeting. Starting with nothing instead of saying, okay, here's all our revenue because we're going to put a 2.5% increase and this is what we get. Now let's spend to it. I don't want to spend to the revenue. I want to say, okay, this is what I need, and then if I'm over, cut back to what the revenue will be. And Dr. Marcus, in putting forward such a tight budget himself, clearly, I think, took that approach. Again, I don't want to speak for him, but he didn't say, okay, here's 65%, I want all this. That's not the conversation we had. We had a very healthy conversation about how we would try to do this as best as we could. And in the end, I was able to pull back my budget based on the revenue to within about $470,000 of what his budget would need. So he's technically, based on what I'm recommending, to send over $470,000 short. To put that in perspective, sounds like a lot of money. To put that in perspective, it was 1.2 last year where we were starting at. And it's 0.5% of our budget, 0.5%. And that's before we heard that state aid was going to tick up, and we had a feeling it would.
Right.
So we're confident that that gap may be closed just by the state's adjustments. And in the scheme of school departments and their requests and municipalities and their offers, if you will, it's minimal. And in my experience, even in my Rhode Island history, it's minimal.
It's refreshing to have a conversation with someone who knows this business well, because what you've done, my list keeps getting longer as we speak, simply because you trigger more things that I think our viewing audience needs to know. Mm-hmm. We're somewhat given a civics lesson, a government lesson, because a lot of people have views about government, but they have that view because they're uneducated on how government operates and what the government's role is. And I think we're giving somewhat of a civic lesson here as to the intricacies of trying to deal with all different structures, from a school, from a board of selectmen to a school committee, mm-hmm. to a town manager, to a superintendent, to all the boards, commissions, employees, et cetera. If you start to draw that chart out, that organizational chart out, it gets fairly expansive when you get to the citizens, and then coming from the bottom up, you're talking to the citizens. This is what you're paying for, folks. Yeah. At the end of the day, good, bad, or different, this is what you're paying for. A few other things that, and soon I'm going to go to our sponsors, because that's what keeps us going. But I do want to talk about two other areas before we move into some other topics. One is what is the town going to be doing with the Stoughton Savings Bank building that was bought? And the other one is, what's the status on the Stoughton Depot?
Okay, we'll start with the depot, because that's sort of the shorter answer. We have historical architects in there now doing some work with us, looking at what needs to be done to shore up the building preliminarily as we make a decision, and this is going to be a board decision as to whether that building will be offered for lease, offered for sale. We did do an RFI already, got a few responses from people, but I think we need to have a better handle on exactly what that building needs before we can determine if we would sell it, because if we're going to sell it, tax credits, historic tax credits go with that building, so there are some complexities with this. Mm-hmm. So if somebody leased the building and they were going to be responsible for the capital work, the tax credits don't necessarily follow the same way because it is a historic building. We're confident that it will have a thriving use at some point. It's just a matter of philosophy for the board to decide Is it a sale? Is it a lease? We've done some major remediation. We had an issue with bat guano, as we've called it. Technically, I guess it's called, but bats do leave residue,
Yep.
and it had to be cleaned, so we have cleaned that. And it's a magnificent building. It's a magnificent
Well,
building.
for a while, when I first came to Stoughton, it was open, and we used to wait in the building.
It's beautiful.
And they used to have a food place in there, and you could get the paper, and you could buy the ticket. So,
It absolutely needs to be a thriving part of our community, and I think there's been some interest. There is outside interest in it. I'm confident that once we decide which direction we want to go, which isn't an easy decision, that's just going to be such an asset, literally at the train. People hop off from Boston or hop onto Boston. It gives just it's a tremendous location. It's a beautiful building.
well, I'm going to hold on the other one. I want to go to our sponsors because I want to make sure I get them in because we're having such an engaging
I could talk
conversation
forever about
here.
the town.
We want to, but I want to go to our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Roy Cohen. The crew would like to thank Maxie's Delicatessen, located at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. You can reach them by calling 781-341-1662. The American Cancer Society is looking for volunteers to drive cancer patients to and from treatments. You can volunteer by calling 1-800-ACS-6662 or online at www.cancer.org. Ilse Mark's Food Pantry and St. Anthony's Free Market is located at 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. To get involved with Meals on Wheels, call Jessica at 781-344-8882, extension 2. The Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business in Stoughton. To advertise, call 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes here in Stoughton. You can see it on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m., either on Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 28. If you have any comments or suggestions, contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, 41 West Street, 4th floor in Boston, Massachusetts, 02111, or call them at 617-536-2460. The 24-hour helplines, 877-870-HOPE or 877-870-4673. Samaritans, 800-252-TEEN or 800-252-8336, or online www.samaritans.hope.org. For you bingo players, I want to tell you about the Monday Night Bingo being held at the Ahava Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. The doors open at 4:30 p.m. The games start at 6:30 p.m. You come on down and win some money. They have 2 big prizes. One is $1,199 and the other one is up to $3,000. So come on down.
Question.
Yes, my guest today is Robin Grimm, who is the town manager here in Stoughton. As you can see, you can get to her at the town hall, which is on Pearl Street. I'm sure all of you Stoughtonites know where that is. You can check out the Stoughton government website at www.stoughton-mass.gov. You can get to the town manager, tell her what you're thinking about, issues that need to be brought to her attention. That's Grimm at Stoughton, or Grimm at Stoughton-mass.gov. And the phone number is 781-341-1300, extension 9211. Now you'll get Reggie first, but then you can get to the town manager.
And if I could just add to that,
Yes.
I am on Facebook. Look for the Stoughton Town Manager. If you search on Facebook Stoughton Town Manager, you can find me. People message me directly with questions or concerns. I try to respond as quickly as I can.
All right.
And Thursday evenings is still open and from 5 to 6:30.
That's right. Every Thursday from 5 to 6:30, you can come in and try to get a time with the town manager. Don't come in there with a 2-hour issue. Come in there with an issue that she can discuss with you.
Make an appointment for the 2-hour issues.
But if you are just tuning in, as I mentioned, my guest today is the town manager of the great town of Stoughton, Robin Grimm. We've been speaking about a number of issues, too lengthy for me to go over each and all of them, but we've talked about what has happened over her now slightly over a year, serving in a capacity here, great history and knowledge base of being in government since serving in the Cranston, Rhode Island government in many capacities, as well as in the school department down there. She knows her budget issues. She understands some of the thoughts and ideas as we can strengthen what's going on here in Stoughton, such as the Park Street Sewer Project and other things. So we're going to continue our conversation, Madam Town Manager, because there are other issues, and I want to go specifically to one which is near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've always been concerned about in my 21 years of being here in Stoughton is the last that I knew, and I had was provided with information on that the black population here in Stoughton is somewhere around 14% here, but that is not represented in town government, not represented in the school department, and it has been a concern of me as to how each person that I've spoken to over the years who sat in the seat that you're in, as well as who sat at the school department. What are some of the things that you think can make that, to warm my heart on that particular issue? What types of things that you might consider in trying to address that?
So this is absolutely a challenge we face because government should be representative of the population. That being said, and I've had this conversation before, I'm not frankly getting an applicant pool that's including a representative population. And so if I'm not getting people of color to apply, I'm not able to hire and diversify my workforce. And I've talked to people on the diversity committee about this. One of the concerns I have is that I'm not certain that our young people of color are being drawn into municipal careers or being drawn toward education to further themselves toward those careers. And you know, we can talk about how we can rectify that. I have a passion for civics. We were just talking off air about that. You know, can we reach into our high school? I believe our diversity population is 25% in our school system of minority population. How can we get those, you know, the people, all kids, frankly, minority or otherwise, excited about government jobs? I'm not seeing applicants with college degrees in public administration of color. I'm not seeing applicants of color with planning degrees, backgrounds in landscape and recreation. So that I'm not able to hire into those roles because I'm not getting the applicants in those roles. How do we do that? Maybe we look at our kids right in our own school system and encourage them to come in. I want kids to come to town hall to learn about government. As I said to you off air, I read to the children at South School. And one little child asked me what I do every day. And I said to the teacher, bring them by. I mean, I want them to come. I want kids to come and learn. So I think an understanding of civics and what it really means and the importance of those things. And if we reach those kids in the minority communities, for example, the importance of urban planning. Why aren't we getting more kids excited about that? It's so critical. And again, minority or otherwise. But we're not drawing kids into those fields. We're not drawing our high school children into those fields. And so I want to do what I can to diversify my applicant pool. That's the start for me. If I don't have the pool of applicants, I can't hire. And I need qualified applicants. And I absolutely believe that I can get qualified applicants if we can get kids of color excited about these professions, which traditionally, for whatever reason, have not been on the forefront of where colleges are recruiting, where we're encouraging kids to go into. How do we get those kids? And I'm asking the question, not just rhetorically, I'm asking the question, how do I excite that population, that minority community about these professions so I have a qualified pool of minority candidates?
Well, I like the point that you made because, you know, I've offered that type of assistance to you in the past. But I also think that your idea of engaging our students, even going down to the middle schools, would work. as far as their understanding of what government's about. I think just generally, and I'm talking about students in general, not even a particular cohort or particular ethnic group. What I'm saying is we're starting to see now in terms of our society generally that young people are not really truly understanding or in tune. They're voting in some instances more so, but fully understanding what government and what the opportunities are in government. So I would hope that if any of the history teachers at the schools are view this program, that they take you up on the offer of one, coming in town meetings coming up. That would be an excellent place for those students to sit in the back of those 9-day meetings in order to, at least some of the 9-day meetings, to see what happens in town government. Now, hopefully that won't turn them off, but come in to see you and the work that you do and what the selectmen do and what the school committee does in order to do that. As far as some of the career things, be more than happy, because it also looks at where you're circulating the information as to where the job availability is. And so maybe we can have that conversation offline. But at least I know in the conversation with you, you're on point, you're sensitive to that issue, and there are those of us who would like to assist you in trying to accomplish that in terms of your outreach effort.
And Dr. Marcus and I have had the discussion about me popping into the schools to do a little bit of a civics day or a civics lecture or something to that effect. I would love to do that. And given the diverse population within the schools, I'm going to hit all populations if I do that.
That's correct.
And that's some of the best ways, I think, to get people excited about it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of the possible development opportunities, but I think there's one critical area, and thank you very much for that. The critical area is this. Oftentimes in town government, there is a sense that we're isolated from and don't need to deal with the upper branches, if you will, in terms of the state legislature and the federal government. And I know in town government we have less of a direct relationship with the federal government, but a lot of what we do is overseen by state government.
Yes, it is.
I know you dealt with, while you were in Rhode Island, with the state legislatures and the governor's office down there. How are you bringing that type of knowledge base to your dealings here in Massachusetts?
Well, so coming into Massachusetts, I had to sort of re-network, if you will. Rhode Island, it's a little easier because it's tiny. You're either related or related to their cousin or know their cousin in Rhode Island. So you're bound to get to know people, and it's a little easier. So coming into Massachusetts, I think one of the things that's been beneficial to me is we have a good core of legislators, state legislators in Stoughton. So Representatives Kafka and Galvin have been very good. When I came on board, I sat and met with the two representatives early on to establish a rapport with them. And Senator Timilty is particularly active with Stoughton. He comes to everything. He's always available. So I'm very fortunate. I've established enough of a rapport where I can pick up the phone and call their offices, and I can text Hannah at Senator Timilty's office if we need to interact. That's critical because, for example, Senator Timilty reached out to me on a public safety, a possibility. He put out a bill for a public safety building facility, much like the school buildings committees that the state has, to help fund public safety facilities. So we just got through talking about a project that might be a $45 million project. If we can get the state to fund a portion of that, that would be extraordinarily helpful. But the fact that Senator Timilty was willing to pick up the phone and call me and ask me to come testify at the State House with him and go be up at the Commonwealth and do that is what we need. And so that type of rapport, I'm very grateful that we have great legislators. So for something as simple as when I came on board, having Reggie just set up a couple of coffees for me was enough to start that discussion. But it's absolutely important. That networking is important. And it's those things behind the scene that the public shouldn't have to worry about. Everybody has to go to work every day. Everybody pays their taxes. Those are the things that you shouldn't even have to know or worry about me doing. I should just be doing those things. And thankfully, we've got a legislative core that's very willing to keep Stoughton in the forefront of what it's doing.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to see that you are. I won't elaborate more than that, but I think that that's an important and critical piece to be done. Our time is winding down, and I got 3 and 4 issues, but you take the one that you want, because we probably won't be able to go one. I have the post office site, the Stoughton Savings Bank, which I know the town owns, and what you're doing for the coronavirus and the response to that.
I'm going to take Corona just because I think that's of critical interest to people. I have a wonderful health services leader, director of public health, in Janice Bruce. Many of our viewers may know her because she oversees our VNA. Janice and I, along with the fire chief, Mark Tisdale, some of Janice's staff, and over at the school department, all sat in with the Board of Health earlier this week. We continue to monitor the situation. I will continue to update on my Facebook page. Anything I can give to the public, I absolutely will. I am a believer that not telling the public creates panic. I trust that the public can handle whatever information I have to share, and I will share it. And I promise people that. And I know that's not always how the departments of health and boards of health like to operate, but I think that's important. Right now, Massachusetts is in a relatively low-risk situation, is how it's being defined. Wear exercise and caution at Town Hall. I've asked people not to come in if they're sick, if their relatives are sick. We've relaxed sick time policies. And usually we're pretty stringent on doctor's notes and all of those things. But right now, I want people to err on the side of caution. That doesn't mean panic, but it means caution. I'm Purelling. I have wipes on top of my desk. Anybody comes in, I don't mind if you wipe your hands or you use Purell. I encourage you to do so. But again, if people have questions or concerns, stay in tune. Our website has a link to the Department of Health and the CDC. So anything we're allowed to put out publicly or we're given, pretty much anything we're given is out there publicly.
Put the Facebook site up. What is it again?
It is Stoughton Town Manager.
All right.
And they will find me.
Well, I'm running out of time. I got to thank some people. I certainly want to thank you. This has been an engaging conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I know I left 2 issues on the table. I'm sure that Roy is going to hold that against me when we finish this program. But nonetheless, that's only because you and I have had so much to talk about, and probably have to have you back again.
Anytime.
Not in a year, though. So I want to thank the station manager, Michael Hammond. I always thank Leo McGowan, who was my cameraman at a point in time. I want to thank Myron Smith, who is my cameraman now for Community Forum. Frank Walsh, who has his own program, has served in that capacity. I want to thank C.J. Mullen. Dave Young, who is aficionado for a number of different things here at the station. I want to thank Rob Rotella, who is handling the producer activities after being trained by that indefatigable Roy Cohen, my executive producer extraordinaire. So again, I want to thank all of them for making this program possible, giving me this opportunity to host. I ask you to tune in. And Madam Town Manager Robin Grimm, thank you for joining again.
Thank you,
Let's
sir.
not make this the last time.
It's always a pleasure.